Welcome to the Economy Politics Show. It's a brand new week. It's February 15, 2021, Monday morning, and we're discussing again developments in the economy as it affects the populace. Today, we're looking at the digital economy and productivity in Nigeria. So much opportunity in that space. And with me to lead this conversation is Dr. Andrew Nevin. He's the partner and chief economist, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Nigeria. Nice to have you join us virtually.
Well, it's great to be here. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, always a pleasure. Now, Dr. Nevin, let's first begin with digitalization. We know that this is the fourth industrial revolution driven by digital technology, and there are dividends of it and how it can impact economies. I know that you've written several about Nigeria, the need for Nigeria to address poverty and unemployment. So how would this effectively address those twin challenges of unemployment and poverty in Nigeria?
Well, I think there's a few ways that IT investments play into it, and part of it are solving some of our domestic challenges at home. So if you think about healthcare or education, the way that they need to be delivered in the Nigerian context can't be the traditional way with large numbers of people. That you need to use some technology to make it better. I mean, remote areas need telemedicine. We've learned a lot from the COVID pandemic in terms of having education that's done remotely, not always successfully, but those methods of teaching and delivering healthcare, as an example, they need digital inputs, and we need those investments in Nigeria to be able to do that. And one of the reasons why we can't do it the traditional way is just the sheer scale of it. I mean, there's about 7 million babies born a year in Nigeria, which means there's 7 million people a year, kids a year in each year of school, and to deliver that much education just needs some innovation. But when we talk about delivering these things, whether it's healthcare or education, for example, I mean, unless you have the bandwidth, unless you have the power that keeps the bandwidth going, the connectivity, it's not going to work. So it has all sorts of knock-on ramifications for the way we need to invest. And I think one of the things about infrastructure is we have to remember infrastructure is just not roads, just not ports, just not inland logistics centers. It's also this digital infrastructure. But the other thing I think that's critical about it that's really become apparent in Nigeria is that we can export services. So everyone's excited about AFCFTA. It's fantastic. It'll integrate Africa. I think it'll be great for Africa. Yeah. But we tend to think of these trade routes as physical goods. But 70% of the world's economy is actually services. And what you see more and more is the export of services without people leaving Nigeria. So people know that we have a huge our greatest amount of FX actually comes from the diaspora. So they leave the country, they take their skills elsewhere, they earn good money, and then they remit part of it back to the country. And one half of the people in Nigeria are touched by remittances, according to the World Bank. What could happen, though, if you could deliver things remotely so that the brains, these people with skills can stay in Nigeria, they can earn the FX and stay in Nigeria in their communities, don't have to emigrate and take all of those problems. And I think that that's going to become bigger and bigger. And we're seeing it already. So if we take an example, the incredible Amal Hassan is a Nigerian entrepreneur from the north. She has her company Outsource Global. It has 1,000 employees. More than half of them are women. They're all educated, and they are delivering services to multinationals and earning FX for Nigeria. But every one of those people is staying in Nigeria. But to do what Amal does and others are starting to do, you need the bandwidth, you need the ICT, and of course you also need the skills, because a lot of what they deliver is often coding or other high-end technical skills that they're delivering. So when you take that all together, you just realize how critical it is for us to have the IT investments, the IT infrastructure, but also the IT skills to be able to do things that we want to do domestically in Nigeria, but also to be able to earn FX around the world.
Yeah. I mean, you've said something very critical about ICT and skills, which is something interesting to see. Other countries are leveraging their diaspora. So definitely Nigeria will have to continue to look at how it can benefit in terms of leveraging its diaspora. Just to bring you to speed, of course, it's a report of your company, PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big professional services companies in the globe, has said that Nigeria will be among the fastest entertainment and media markets in the next 5 years, but will be enabled by technology. So I also believe that that's one other area that could be unlocked by technology. But let's still leverage on infrastructure. You've talked about broadband, and you said power is there, but broadband is very critical. What are enabling infrastructures do you see supporting this digital economy, unlocking its potentials?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So to begin with, I mean, when we say the digital economy, we would like to see the digital economy across the nation. So this is not a question of Lagos and Yaba. It's not a question of just Abuja. I mean, there's no point in just those two places coming out. I mean, you want to have young people who have digital skills, if they're in Calabar, if they're in Jos, if they're in Sokoto, that they can actually participate in the digital economy, either trying to build up something that works locally, as I said, education, healthcare, fintech, or something where they can work for money for people that are abroad and earn FX. So we need to have this digital infrastructure everywhere. The beginning start of it, of course, is power. Now, our view has always been obviously the discos are critical to the whole infrastructure, but at the end of the day, so much power in Nigeria in the medium term is going to come from solar, and it's going to be produced in situ. So if you think about, for example, if you go back to this, you want to do an outsource job, something from the UK outsourced to you in Sokoto, you have to have reliable power before anything, because no one's going to outsource to you if they can't depend on you kind of showing up for work every day and being connected into their system in the UK. And the only way to guarantee having reliable power is something that's kind of locally produced. It's produced right there, which means solar, means some kind of storage system. So actually the starting point to have the ICT infrastructure is the power infrastructure on that. And we're big believers in these renewables, largely solar for Nigeria. Lagos, of course, is a real hotbed of innovation on there. There's so many different experiments going on, but there's all sorts of things going on. The rural electrification, the national body doing it, lots of private companies trying to do stuff. But if we have the power, then the next step is to have the connectivity, right? And I think, again, there's different technologies that are emerging. There may be more satellite technologies. The price of that's really come down. Google has its balloons at about 20 kilometers. I suspect in the next 5 years, we'll see some of these technologies that come to give, the power is there, and then the connectivity is there to stay connected to the digital world. So then you can do your job, you can watch your Nollywood movies, etc. But I think we should focus as much on this digital infrastructure around the country as we do on roads.
Yes, yes. Focusing on the digital infrastructure, and of course, power will be very critical. I like how you connected Sokoto to even Calabar and other parts of the country, it's not just Lagos and Abuja. Well, let's look at the opportunities for deepening the fintech industry. In 2018, when you made a presentation on the FinTech Nigeria retreat, you talked about the need to address some of the enablers, for example, innovation, funding, market penetration, product life cycle, customer impact, and even the regulatory impact. When you look at them again today in 2021, which are those areas that you see gaining traction in Nigeria, and which are those areas that still need to be addressed to unlock the potentials of fintech industry?
Well, I think we still have a fair amount of exclusion. I forget the exact numbers from Athena, but I think if I remember right, we still have 30 to 40% of adults without access to formal financial services on that. I think that the one major innovation that's really though having an impact is kind of agency banking, right? So now, if you think about it from the financial institutions viewpoint, I mean, we know you putting big physical infrastructure buildings, traditional buildings out there. Is not viable, right? Yeah. On the other hand, just saying that we're going to have a fintech service with no people is also doesn't quite work, because particularly for people who maybe not used to formal financial services, the trust there, the knowledge gap is there. So you need some intermediate step here, right? And that intermediate step is you have an agency banking or agency financial services where you have a trusted person in the community that can help people access things, help them get loaded up on their phone. If the connectivity is not there, there's manual ways to fill in. So I think that the agency program of the central bank and SANF, so the super agent network, have been fantastic. And I think the very good regulatory step is to say don't have every bank build its own agency network. That's just wasteful, right? Instead, let's focus on making sure there's agents that can give the products of multiple banks in a location. And of course, SANF is there tracking those locations and tracking the activity on that. So I think that's a good step. I mean, but even though that's a good step, we still face another issue, which is that just the economy has not been very good for the last 3 or 4 years, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic has created other pressures that we're all aware of, and it's just easier to bring people to the financial system if people are getting wealthier, if they have more money, if they have more need for these products. So, if we had economic growth of, as we've always said, 6, 7, 8%, we'd see the take up on it. But I think from a regulatory viewpoint, I think the CBN and others have done a good job. I think the Bankers Committee have done a good job. The CBN just recently introduced the idea of a sandbox, regulatory sandbox, so you can play around with doing sort of something on a small scale without taking big risk for the system. And then when it works, it comes out. And the level of financial innovation in Nigeria is very high. I mean, the banks do a lot of innovation. Then we have such strong fintechs. I mean, obviously InterSwitch, Paystack, Paga, Innovectus, come as examples to mind. And it also just goes back to another theme that I mentioned earlier, which is Nigeria exporting services. So we can export the ICT services or the business processing outsource services, as I mentioned with Amal Hassan's company, and she's exporting to the UK and the US, for example. With AFCFTA, hopefully we can export those services to other African nations. We already export Nollywood and music to other African nations, so that's another set of services. But you're also increasingly seeing Nigeria export financial services. So Access Bank is increasing its footprint around the continent. UBA's got a very strong footprint. EcoBank, of course, EcoBank is not based in Nigeria; it's based in Togo. But in a way, it is a West African bank. It was formed by the governments of West Africa. Nigeria is the largest West African country, and EcoBank Nigeria, its largest footprint, its largest country. So it has the big footprint there. So you can really see, I think Nigeria is in a very strong position to export these services as well. So all three of those areas: entertainment, financial services, and business processing, outsourcing. But it all comes back to, can we build the digital infrastructure in enough places around the country?
Very, very important. You made the mention that we need to grow at 6 to 8%. And still in that forum where you spoke, you talked about us being able to attract at least 40 trillion naira investment annually to hit that. Well, we're really trying our best to catch up with that, because the investment has been one major area of challenge for Nigeria. So looking at the enabling environment to attract those investments, the digital economy has shown that we can really attract a lot. Last year, we saw investments coming of over $250 million to the fintech industry in particular. The big one was the Paystack acquisition by Stripe, amongst others. So when you look at the policy environment and what should trigger or catalyze more of these investments, what will you be looking at as those enablers that can really convince the investors?
Well, I think that we had a huge effort by a lot of people, particularly people like Dr. Jamoke and our whole team at PEBEC, for example, that have tried to make it a better investment environment. But as we know, we're still kind of short of investments. So Nigerians are not investing enough. The diaspora is not investing enough. And if those two groups don't invest, then the rest of the world is not going to invest enough. And of course, in the COVID year, no one is really doing direct investment because no one's visiting places. So it's been very, very tough that way. So I think there's been a lot of efforts. But what we've said is, in a way, even though the PEBEC has done as good a job as it could in the circumstances, there's some very difficult structural decisions that have not been being taken. Now, people often say the big three structural things are the unification of the currency, the way power is structured, and the fuel subsidy. And we would say, in a way, to us, those are almost the easier issues because they're simple, relatively simple decisions. And of course, the government and the central bank have gone a long way on the fuel subsidy and on the unification. Of course, it's the stated policy to unify the exchange policy. We've kind of made steps. It's got a little more difficult with the drop in oil price, but you still can see it coming. But we would actually say the more difficult decisions are around what really came out of the Orange Shea report. So I think people will recall, I think the report came out in 2013. His Excellency President Goodluck Jonathan assented to, accepted the report. Of course, his term came to an end, was not implemented. His Excellency President Buhari didn't do anything for a number of years. This year in March, he assented to the RSA report, but we're now sitting here almost a year later, and we still haven't seen any action. And we have this complexity in Nigeria, the number of MDAs, the number of overlapping jurisdictions. And while there's talk about electricity, there's talk about the fuel issue, there's talk about the currency issue, what we haven't seen is the Orange report is just difficult. I was reading somewhere the other day, there are 14 agencies connected to space in Nigeria, and you ask yourself, this is a country that it's just space may not be the priority for us. Or we should obviously participate in what's happening with satellites and deliver bandwidth to us, but do we need 14 space agencies? And then of course what's happening right now in the government is that because of the economic pressure and the low revenue generation, every one of these agencies is starved for funds, which then creates, if they're a regulatory agency that can extract fees from its industry, it then creates perverse incentives for the agency and what it does in the short term. And so unless that issue really gets addressed, to simplify and make it very, very clear what's happening in each industry, it's going to be difficult to move forward. So while we've seen a lot of progress in many ways, we just feel like that fundamental issue, we've made progress. His Excellency the President has assented to implementing it, but we haven't made the next step, which is literally to merge agencies on that, and that's a painful thing. But I think as long as it's not addressed, we're going to continue to have a lot of challenges to get the investment we need.
Very, very important. Now let's discuss of something that's been really a trend, but of course, you've also talked about blockchain, and you also, they say, wait, you put your money where your mouth is. You've also been involved in blockchain in the agricultural commodity space, the Binkabian issuing and tracking commodity trading. You've talked about blockchain, and what we captured from your discussions 2 years ago was how it is able to even help the Nigerian customs in collection of excise and tax, even how it can really help in terms of land allocation, and of course discovery, helping in terms of other areas, even down to elections. So when we look at the digital platforms today and the digital economy and the recent directive by the Central Bank of Nigeria on restricting banks from transacting with the cryptocurrency, it had several reactions. But when you look at global guidelines, like in the UK, the Financial Conduct Authority has continued to issue advisories to UK investors that, look, you have to be careful. You could lose your money. There's no clarity in how it operates. I mean, if you put your money there, it's not regulated. You have to look at those companies regulated in financial services before investing there. So I'm looking at the sandbox, which you mentioned, which we've discussed with the CBN about. Isn't it a way that the CBN can say, let's strengthen this sandbox, look at the various ecosystems, even the cryptos, and begin to streamline and know the ones operating. And then we can talk about even a digital currency, because like 5 countries, we understand, are developing things around digital currency.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I mean, just to take a step back for a minute, I mean, everyone needs to remember blockchain is a technology. What's special about it? It's special because it has a ledger that is transparent to all the relevant parties, and how it's updated is recorded for all time. So it's a single version of the truth. And if you think about things, you realize your whole life is governed by ledgers. So what you have at the bank is a ledger, except it's a private ledger that the bank keeps. If there's a dispute between you and the bank, it's the bank that has the version of the truth, right? Your credentials, whether you did WIAC, whether you did NYSC, I mean, that again is another something that's on a ledger somewhere. Where you graduated from university, if you went to university, what happened with your employment. They're all on ledgers that are private ledgers. And of course, we've seen in Nigeria, we look at the controversies we have over whether someone did their NYSC, whether they did their WIAC, because that ledger it's just uncertain, right? So the value of the technology in a low trust society is to create a ledger that multiple parties can look at. So if you think about use cases, I've always thought for Nigeria, maybe the most valuable use case would be academic credentials so that you would know. So if you think about us at PwC, obviously people apply. We would like to verify their academic credentials. It's quite a laborious exercise right now. And of course, when the academics are on strike, given the conflicts that we've had the last few years, it then becomes actually impossible to go to the registrar. It's just not there. So that for us is a fantastic use case. If you actually go back to the way Bitcoin was created, I mean, the blockchain concept was brilliant. I mean, it's just such an incredible innovation. But it's almost an accident that innovation was used first to create a cryptocurrency. It could have been used to create academic credentials. It could have been used to create all the other use cases that we know about. So let's not confuse cryptocurrencies with blockchain. So I think Nigeria really can use blockchain in many places. You cited the customs and the excise tax. They did a fantastic proof of concept with that on that. Now, with respect to the cryptocurrencies, I understand exactly why there's so much conflict, because if you think about what's happened here, we've grown up in a world where the central bank creates money. They create money, and then the commercial banks that have been licensed by the central banks around the world that are under their control, tightly regulated, they then can create money, another round of money creation by loaning out money. And of course, so that's the way we create money. Now someone comes along and they say, no, I'm going to create money totally privately. So we've created Bitcoin. People, I'm sure, are aware, many on the show today, that there's a max of 21 million Bitcoins. There's no real centralization. There's a committee that, the rules, but you have a distributed system. So all of a sudden you've created this private distributed money, and it's challenging the public sector entities like central banks that create money. So it's not a big surprise that there's this collision. And as an economist, I mean, it's amazing to me to watch what's unfolding, because again, I grew up when I was taking my graduate work in economics, monetary theory, back in the 1980s, early 1980s. I mean, it was presented as though it was all well understood. This is the way it works. The central bank does this, and you have liquidity ratio and money supply and velocity of money and M0, M1, M3, M6 in the United States. And we've all worked that out. And then all of a sudden, someone comes along and totally threatens that, upends that idea. So I understand fully, for example, Central Bank of Nigeria being very concerned about it, because now we have private entities creating this money and trying to figure out, and the protection is obviously an important aspect to it, because these aren't investments where the underlying value. I mean, particularly someone that takes leverage on it is taking a huge risk on that. So I'm not surprised, and I think we're going to have a number of years where we're trying to work out exactly how this technology, works, and if private currencies fit into our system or don't fit into our system. But the sandbox from our viewpoint, is a very good way to get innovation in a smaller sort of subspace that things can be tried out, and we see how they work.
That would be a very good approach to the sandbox. And then, Dr. Nevin, let's look at what will shape the digital economy in the year. COVID-19, like many has said, has brought to the fore the opportunities that technology can do, like you rightly said, healthcare, edutech, and even workplaces now are going through virtual remote experiences. When Nigeria will be marking 20 years of the telecommunications privatization, which has seen companies move from phone calls, recharge cards, to even data services, even now to the point, like you said, we have payment service banks, telcos involved in fintech activities in the ICT space. How would you assess that? And also juxtapose that with the NIN, the National Identity Number. I remember that we've always talked about the need to have identity. You talk about blockchain helping in addressing the complex issues of things like academic credentials. So NIN and, of course, 20 years of telco, how would that play into other issues that will shape the digital economy in Nigeria?
Well, I think, let me begin with the NIN issue. I mean, I think it's obviously, I think most people would agree, critical to really get a robust identity system in Nigeria. There's been a lot of different attempts. I mean, the BVN, the bank verification number, is a fantastic innovation on that, really the most advanced in the world, and this ability to link all bank accounts biometrically. So all credit to the Bankers Committee and the CBN and NIBS for putting that together. But you'd still prefer at the end of the day to have some kind of government identity program. And of course, I think I've had my biometrics taken at least 4 times for the BVN, for the FRSC, for Lego, because I have Lego state identity, and of course for my work permit, and now coming up with the NIN. I think one of the challenges, though, if we look, say, at India as an example with their Aadhaar system, I mean, I think they've registered the vast majority of adults. I don't know the exact number, but I believe in excess of 90%. But they use more the carrot than the stick approach, that people who were registered biometrically got benefits from the state. So there was a reason to do it, and they went from village to village, and people gave it. The system's very robust. I think the NIN is going to be a challenge for Nigeria. We keep pushing back the date because just physically to register everyone's impossible. But but I still think whatever date they choose to cut people off, we're going to have some real challenges on that as we stand back. But just in general, I think. Let me tell a little bit of a story I heard the other day. So I've been talking about this export of services. So I heard the other day about someone who got a job with a European global organization at a European salary rate, sitting in Nigeria. Now, if you think about it, there's 7 million babies born a year in Nigeria. There's 5 million in Europe. Europe's population is shrinking. I think COVID has taught us that a lot of things that you thought had to be physical can be virtual. I mean, for example, if you read some of these futurist books, they're talking about to clean a hotel room in Norway, in Oslo, you would have it remotely controlled. It could be controlled by a worker in the Philippines. It could be controlled by a worker in Lagos. So I think that COVID has kind of accelerated this understanding of how many things can be done remotely. So then you really say, what's the limit for Nigeria in terms of participating in the global economy? I don't think in the global IT economy, global digital infrastructure, I don't think there's any limits. I mean, there's so much human capital potential in Nigeria if it's trained, and we have so many people, and we have shrinking populations in Europe, and soon shrinking. Well, we already have shrinking populations in Japan and China. Soon we'll have the same thing happening in other countries like India. So we have the human resources. And like I just gave this example, you think about it from the company's viewpoint. So this global company, they've already figured out people can work from home. Now they found the talent they want in Nigeria. They're willing to pay a European wage, or maybe a little bit less, but to make it worth their while. But they're getting exactly the same work as if they had a worker sitting in Berlin who was not coming to the office, except the workers in Lagos. They don't have to worry about immigration issues from their end. And I think as people discover this, you're going to find that we actually have an explosion of this kind of, I don't even want to call it outsourcing of remote working, connecting things together on that. And I think that what's critical for Nigeria, so now you think about the direction of the federal government, and they're always talking about manufacturing, and you think of this kind of traditional model where you start at low-end manufacturing and move up the value chain over time. And I'm kind of sitting there saying, well, why if we train one Nigerian to be a very good coder, and they earn $60,000 a year that they bring into Nigeria, and support their family and their cousins' education and things, versus trying to build a factory that creates low-end manufacturing like a fan. It's much easier for us to export the brains of the Nigerian in this global economy, in global digital economy, than it is to try to build a factory, replace Chinese or Thai or Vietnamese low-end manufacturing kind of up that scale. So I'd rather go for this high-end, real brain economy on that. An example I told you about that person, that's just one I heard about. This must now. I just think it's going to start to explode on that, both in an organized sense, like Amal Hassan's company or tech experts in Lagos, where they have many seats, or in this informal way that I just described, where this was one individual being hired by a foreign company. And that to me is the best strategy for us. And I go back to this theory of how countries develop. We need to let's just put that aside. Yeah, we can learn lots of lessons from the way China developed or Vietnam developed, but we want to find our own development path for the way the world works today. So let's leapfrog some of those low-end manufacturing strategies and go right to exporting what's the highest value-added thing, which are brains, and which we have plenty of supply.
So we should just leapfrog through technology to export services particularly our human resources.
You go back to what this conversation is all about. There was no way to exit. What I just described could not have happened 10 years ago. You couldn't have had very smart Nigerian who was capable of playing a key role at a major multinational bank, sitting in Lagos playing that role. So that was nice. But now that's possible, and they can earn the same salary or close to the same salary as the European counterpart, which is a lot of money in the Nigerian context. Makes a big difference to their own situation, to their family situation, to the country's FX situation. So let's embrace that as a strategy, rather than kind of go through these kind of traditional paths that work for other countries when the situation was different. So I think it incredible opportunity for Nigeria. And if you think you go back to Amal's company, which is amazing, she's got 1,000 employees. There's no limit to what she could do or her company could do over the next decade in this digital world.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andrew Nevin. Very nice discussing with you the digital economy and productivity in Nigeria, particularly the fact that we can really leapfrog leveraging technology to export services, particularly the rich human capital resource that we have. Thank you, and we look forward to having this conversation some other time with you around the digital space and the economy in Nigeria. Once again, thank you
so much. It was great pleasure today. Thank you.
Thank you, yes. We had Dr. Andrew Nevin, the partner and chief economist, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Nigeria, discussing the digital economy and productivity in Nigeria. That'll be all for the Economy and Politics show for today. You can join the conversation on the economy and politics space. Log on to our website, www.proshareng.com. When you log on to it, you click on the right-hand side of the bar, you see Nigeria economy. Click on it and you see all the developments happening in the Nigeria economy space. Still on the right-hand side of the bar, you can click on tech trends, things that are happening in the digital space. We also have developments around blockchain and cryptos, and also government regulation and technology. All those are in our platform and website if you log on again to www.proshareng.com. Also, if you have any comments or views about how Nigeria can leverage digital economy to drive productivity as a nation, send your views and comments to news@proshareng.com. We'll be glad to receive them and, of course, respond to you appropriately. You can see our social media platforms already displaying on the screen. To come your way again, thank you for watching. Have a nice day and stay safe.